In this class, we are going to be looking tonight at the book of 2nd John, possibly 3rd John. They're both short books, one chapter long. And we began by looking at 1st John, so we're just looking at the epistles of John here, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And again, the author, while the author is not named in either 2nd or 3rd John, it begins with the identification of the elder. Now, the fact that it says the elder, somebody might say, well, was John an elder? Does that mean he was an elder in the church? No, because of the fact that John would not have designated himself as the elder. The word elder here just means the aged man, and everybody knew who it was. And these books, there's been very little, if any, disputing the fact that these books have been attributed to the Apostle John. And so this is not something that has, from the earliest ages of Christianity, they've been attributed to John without any sort of dispute. All right, let's begin here. And again, as we look at these writings, we can remember when he wrote 1st John, and we're talking about the early 90s AD, there was no apparent persecution at the time when he wrote the first letter. And as we look at the 2nd and 3rd letter, it seems that they were written probably about the same period of time, because once again, he does not mention any sort of persecution that the brethren might be enduring or having to deal with, other than the fact of persecution from within. We've talked about the Gnostics, and surely there were Gnostics who were not part of the church, but John talks about the Gnostics, people that believed the teaching of the Gnostics. He talks about, we'll look at that here in a moment, how they went out from us. Well, before you can go out, you have to be in. And so we're talking about brethren who embraced error that John's needing to warn the brethren about paying attention to. All right, verse 1 of 2nd John. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all those who have known the truth. So again, the elder, the aged, he's identifying himself only as the old man, but they knew who he was. He says this letter is to the elect lady. Now, I understand this to be a sister in Christ. Some might have tried to say, well, is it not possible that this is figurative language and that John is actually writing a letter to the church? Well, first of all, what's the purpose of the figurative language? John uses figurative language in the book of Revelation because there was a need for figurative language in the book of Revelation to keep the Christians, keep those who were not Christians from being able to understand what he's writing to the Christians. And so, yes, sister.
So the church is also his bride, which would be a her.
This is true, but if you look at it here, it says to the lady and her children. Now he's writing, if the lady is the church, then who are her children? The church, the same thing. Okay, so if we look at it from that point of view, we understand that you'd had to translate the Greek word curia as lady, and then we'd translate the Greek word curia as lady, then we'd have to interpret the word lady as church, and then we'd have to construe the Greek word tekna, which means children, as members of the church. And so he would basically be saying to the church and to the church. And that wouldn't make sense. So let's continue here. The elect, and we'll also notice as we get down to the last verse, he talks about the elect sister, or the elect lady who has children, who was the sister to this sister. So who would that be? All right, let's continue here. John indicates here that he loves this sister. He loves her in the truth. That means he loves her sincerely, he loves her genuinely, he loves her truly. And it's because of her reputations, other people love her in the same way. Now, someone who is not mentioned here is a husband, which would indicate that either she could be a widow or she could be married to a man who's not a Christian. One of those two options would be most likely. But John goes on and says, because of the truth which abides in us and will be with us forever. So what's attractive to John about this family? The truth that abides in them. And why does it abide in them? Well, he tells it abides in them because their love for the truth. Truth would find its true home in them forever, John indicates. Verse 3, he says, grace, mercy, and peace will be with you. Well, here's what we have to understand. Without grace, there can be no mercy and peace. Grace is in reference to the transgressions of man. Mercy is, that would be the misery which sin produces, that we need that mercy. And then peace is going to be the result of grace and mercy in our life. And so he says, grace, mercy, and peace will be with you from God the Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So, grace, mercy, and peace all come from the Father and from the Son. And he says they come from the Father and the Son of the Father in truth and love. Two keynote words that John uses. He talks about truth and love. Remain faithful to the truth. Display love that issues from the truth. There are 5 times in this book in which John uses the word truth. When we get to third John, he uses this word. He refers to it 6 different times. Verse 4. Yeah, quite a bit right there. All right, verse 4. I rejoice greatly that I have found some of your children walking in truth, as we receive commandment from the Father. So what John says is, I've seen some of your children, and I'm happy to report that they're being faithful to God. Now, does that mean that she's got children that aren't faithful? No, I wouldn't interpret it to mean that. That means that he's come across some of her children where they live, and he's happy to report to her, I saw some of your kids in this city, and I'm happy to report that they're being faithful to the Lord. Continuing here, verse 5, and now I plead with you, lady. Now, lady is from the Greek curia, as I mentioned. If we translated that into English, it would be Cyria, C-Y-R-I-A. The word lady is not used anywhere else in the New Testament. Now, woman is used often, but the word lady is not used anywhere else. So, either because John is using this particular word, it's just an unidentified sister that he refers to as lady, or it could be that it's a sister whose name is Curia or Syria. You know, it could be, don't know. And he says, I beseech, that is, I plead with you. He's making a strong petition based upon their relationship of Christian love. I beseech, plead with you, not as though I wrote a new commandment to you, but that which we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. Now he says, this isn't a new commandment. We have had it from the beginning. Does that mean we've had it from the beginning of creation? No, it wouldn't be that, because otherwise, when Jesus says in John 13, verse 34 and 35, a new commandment I give you, what is it? That you love one another as I've loved you, and you also love one another. By this, all will know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another. And so John is saying, I haven't written you a new commandment. We've known this from the beginning of the ministry of Christ. And so what is it? We should love one another. Now here's a question. What do we need to be reminded to love one another?
But isn't that really a restate of what Christ said when he was talking about what are the two greatest commandments upon which the whole law hangs? To love your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then also to love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're loving your neighbor as yourself, you're loving one another.
Well, I think the difference here is, though, we've got at least three different classes of people here. You got the love for God, you got the love for yourself, you got the love for, in this case, one another, brethren, and you should love your neighbor, which is, when you look at Galatians 6:10, that as we have opportunity, do good unto all men, but especially to the household of faith. And so when it says love your neighbor, this would go beyond your Christian brother or sister, anybody that needed help. Question or comment? Okay, let's continue here then. Oh, I asked the question, what would he even have to say? Let's remember to love one another. Well, why did Paul have to say, husbands, love your wives? Why did Paul have to write to Titus and say, the older women should teach the younger women to love their husbands, their children?
Most of the time back then, the wives were told to marry so-and-so by their parents.
And
So they didn't have a chance to court or do anything like that, to learn to even like them, much less know who they were.
well, there might have been some of those arranged marriages, but what about when John tells his sister, you love the brethren?
Well, you said, women learn to love your husbands. They couldn't, they had to learn to do that because they were betrothed to them, the husband. They didn't know.
If they were under that arrangement, now you're assuming that everybody at this time was marrying based upon arrangement, and but the point I'm trying to make here is, love is something that, while we think of it as being something that, well, once you're in it, you're in it. And everybody that's been married a while realizes there are times when you don't feel that same gushy feeling you felt when you first started holding hands. And there are times when, as we say, the rubber meets the road, and we're dealing with some issues. And if we're not careful, we can allow the distractions of the world to interfere with our keeping the promise that we made to God and one another, who, for better or for worse. If we're in it for better or for worse, that means there are going to be times where we're going to have to make more effort. It's easy. When things are better, it's easy to look and say, I sure do love you. But when things are tough, we might have to work at it a little more to say, well, I do love you.
And that's because Christian love, godly love, is a choice we make. It's not chemical.
It's not based on emotion.
Exactly. And so when we have to make a choice, that's something that we continually have to do. It's not a one-time kind of thing. It's a continual thing, choosing to love that person, to love God. Every day, every moment of our life, we're continually making that choice and needing to be reminded that we need to make that choice.
But as John continues here in verse 6, he says, this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. So, this is love. He say, this is love, a warm, fuzzy feeling that overwhelms you. No, he said, this is love, and it includes duty. Love and duty, neither are complete without the other. 1 John 5, when we studied that, verse 13, John said, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. John 14:15, Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when Paul's writing that chapter of love, and he talks about, though I give all my possessions to help the poor, though I give my body to be burned, and see, both of those are good, noble things to do. Oh, there's people that need help. I'm going to give them everything that I own to help the poor. Oh, you want me to quit preaching, or you're going to burn me to the stake? Well, go ahead and burn me to the stake. Though I give everything I have to the poor and allow myself to be burned, Paul says, if the motivation is not love, it profits me nothing. So it's not a matter of just, as I say quite regularly, following rules. It's not a checklist to say, well, God, obviously you know that I love you because look at how I checked the list. I was there for Sunday school. I was there for worship. I was back Sunday night. I went on Wednesday night. I didn't cuss this week. And we just can go right down the list. So don't that mean I love you, God, because I kept the rules? Well, the emotion without obedience is useless, but duty that's just based upon the duty that we have, there's no love, then it's just cold formalism. Without love, obeying God is going to be grievous to us. And love makes obedience a pleasure. Love, even though in our obedience we might be suffering persecution, there's happiness because of the motivation for the fact that we're being punished. We've been obeying God. Remember Paul and Silas in jail after they'd been beaten? What were they doing? Their backs are bleeding and they're in there singing and praying. I'm afraid there might be a lot of people be in there going, nobody knows. But it would indicate that they were in there praising God, giving thanks to God. Thanks for what? You just got beaten, your back's split open, you're bleeding. Well, thank God that I've been found worthy to suffer for his cause. Verse 6 continuing, this is the commandment as you have heard from the beginning, you should walk in it. This is the command. This is an obligation. It's not optional. What's the most important command? That we referred to it a moment ago, Matthew chapter 22, 37 through 40. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. The second is likened to it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But notice verse 40. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. You see, you can keep all the law and the prophets, but if you're not motivated, if it's not based upon love for God and love for others, keeping all those rules don't make any difference. The reason why we want to keep those rules, the reason why we want to do those things is motivated by love. Love for God, love for one another. We cannot obey any of God's commandments truly without the motivation being love. Question or comment? All right, verse 7. For many deceivers, this is what I referred to in our introduction tonight. For many deceivers, you think, oh, well, these are these people on the outside that are trying to bring the people out of the church. Many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Christ as coming in the flesh. Now, we've mentioned this every week and talked about John's writings, is that he deals a whole lot with warning the brethren about the Gnostics, the ones that believe that Jesus didn't come in the flesh. And then there's the Jews, Judaism, which they would have never accepted Jesus as the Christ. So the Christ did not come in the flesh. But there were brethren that have decided that, you can't taint your spirit, because you see, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. And so you can do anything you want to in flesh and blood. You can sin all you want to, and that's not going to affect your salvation. That was part of the Gnostics' teaching. Another part was that Jesus, or the Christ, did not come in the flesh, but instead God just caused there to be like a figment of everybody's imagination. They just thought they saw him. Or the man Jesus was not deity, but deity came upon him at the baptism of Jesus, and the deity left him when he was nailed to the cross. These are all teachings that have to do with the Gnostics. And so John, he has to warn the brethren, watch out for these people who used to obey the truth. He's talking about brethren. They have gone out from us. They've gone out into the world. And he doesn't just call them brethren at all. He says deceivers. Brethren who had become deceivers because of the fact that they were not teaching the truth. They do not confess Christ as coming. Notice he says they've gone out to the world. They do not confess Christ as coming in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. Now, he's not saying that they are the antichrist. We've talked about that. But he's saying this is a characteristic of someone who would be like the antichrist. They are against Jesus. They deny Christ as coming in the flesh. Verse 8, look to yourselves that we do not lose those things we work for, but that we may receive a full reward. Look to yourself. He's saying, examine yourself. Make sure you're prepared to deal with error. Because if we're not prepared, we could lose the things that we've been working for, is what he's talking about here. And what things would that be? Well, ultimately, we're talking about a home in heaven, but we'll also lose the blessings of heaven while we're here on earth if we're not prepared to do what God, to continue doing what God would have us do. So again, what should be our relationship with those who teach false doctrine? Well, we're fixing to find out, because you see, this sister is faced with that situation. This sister is faced with the situation of what do we do when we have these false teachers? They've gone out from us. But I'm still having, she's still having to deal with them. And John says, well, here's what you need to do. Verse 9. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. Now, the American Standard Version says, whosoever goeth onward. Whosoever goes too far. You see, whoever transgresses, whoever is progressive, they have progressed too far. Many times we'll have people who have decided, well, times are changing. You know, and since we're living in a more modern time than when the Bible was written, and so there's reason for changes to take place, and we're sure God that would accept some changes here. And so we are going to be progressive. And by going beyond what God says for us to do, we have transgressed. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. They don't abide in the doctrine, they don't have God. But he says, he who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. So, he who keeps on abiding, obviously, because they at one time did abide. So he who keeps on abiding in Christ's doctrine, they don't add to it, they don't take away from it. They are those who are going to continue to have a relationship with the Father and the Son. So what's the relationship she's supposed to have with the person that's teaching false doctrine? Well, let's read on, verse 10. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him. You know, many believe it would be better translated rather than if anyone comes. It would be more accurate to say when they come. Because it's not a matter of if, they're coming. The devil's not going to leave you alone if you're doing what's right. It's going to happen. And when it happens, don't receive them into your house or greet him. Now, according to Romans 12:13, Paul talked about how we're obligated to extend Christian hospitality. This sister evidently had a home and a means, the ability to entertain strangers, traveling brethren. And John tells her, don't assist the false teacher. Don't allow the false teacher to stay in your home. Do not receive him into your house nor greet him. Now, let's think about this a minute, because if you take that just at face value without thinking about the consistency of it as in being able to do God's will and teach people. Okay, he teaches error. You can't come into my house. I can't even speak to you. Well, how am I going to convert him? How am I going to teach him what's right? How are we going to talk to the Jehovah's Witness or the Mormon knocks on their door? You see, whenever they knock on my door, the first thing I say is, come in. Because I've already been praying that God would give me the opportunity to teach. And he sent them to my door. Now, when it says, do not greet them, nor do not let them into your house, he's not saying that what's being dealt with here is treating them in a way that promotes their error, gives them credibility in their mind of how we're treating them. That we don't have a problem with what they're teaching. Because it doesn't mean it's wrong to show any hospitality. As I've already mentioned, Galatians 6:10, therefore as we have opportunity to do good unto all men, especially the household of faith. Well, this is a false teacher, so there's an exception. We can't do good to them. So the lady, that's the Jehovah's Witness that knocked on my door, got in her car, and she had a flat tire. Sorry, can't help you. Not allowed to assist to help false teachers. To fix her, to change her flat tire is not bidding her Godspeed. To bid someone Godspeed means that we're bidding them success in what they're doing. Yes, sir?
One way to help make all of this second letter of John make some sense is, the theme, and according to some commentators, is that he's talking about hospitality throughout this. Yeah, he's talking about the teachers and the wolves that are out there trying to deceive people, but in the beginning of the book, he's talking about the basis of what Christian hospitality is. Love one another. And then he goes into talking about what is the behavior of Christian hospitality in verses 4 to 6. And then he talks here, the bounds of hospitality, what we can do and what we shouldn't do. And then in the end, he talks about the blessings of Christian hospitality. You know, so you get two lessons out of things.
Yeah. Well, as John has mentioned at the beginning, you know, obviously she already has the reputation of being hospitable, you know, and the warning for her would be careful. Make sure that you don't understand that, well, to do what God would have them to do, even though they're teaching error, they need a place to stay. They need, you know, no.
And the times were different between then and today. Because then, the way the church was new, it's fresh, and, I mean, when Jesus sent his disciples out, he says, you know, if the people don't want to be hospitable to you, shake the dust off your feet and go on to the next town. And so here, they're trying to take care of those people that are supposedly of the faith, but don't believe in Christ and his deity and whatnot, and that he lived as a man, and trying to teach the wrong thing and pull people away from the true faith.
Mm-hmm.
So those people, you gotta, you know, it's just like an erring brother. You almost need to, like, withdraw fellowship from them to push them off. Now, if you get opportunity to teach them and try to work with them, oh, absolutely, we need to do that. But there's certain things we can't do in line of hospitality.
If anyone comes that does not bring this doctrine, it's all based upon the truth, whether they're teaching it or whether they're perverting it. Do not treat them in such a way that encourages them in their false teaching. That's what he's talking about here. You don't want to give them credence in their false teaching. You know, when he says do not even greet them, Chairo, C-H-A-R-O, literally means Godspeed. And as I mentioned, Godspeed means your desire, expressing desire for their success. And so you're not wishing them success in teaching error. Any other question or comment? Yes, sir.
Tim, I'm assuming that based on this, I mean, many of us, maybe most of us, perhaps have family members, you know, cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever, that are, you know, members of some denomination. They're in our homes, and they stay in our homes. You know, when we have, you know, spiritual discussions, they probably understand that we don't wish them Godspeed, and that we disagree, but we certainly have I mean, they're not members of the church, they're, you know, they're fell away. These are people that have been in the denomination. We still have a relationship with them, and I assume that's.
Well, there is a difference in what Paul has to say. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, so that is, I mean, that relationship we have with them, like I said, they need to stay in our homes, you know, we have that relationship, and there's nothing wrong with that, correct?
Well, certainly not, because of the fact that if you have a door that's opened up to be able to teach, that's one thing. It's another thing to bring them in knowing that they teach and embrace error, and they're going to leave knowing that as far as you're concerned, you don't have a problem with it. So, when Paul tells, well, let me look at verse 11, then I'll go into my next comment. For he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. All right, well, to bid them Godspeed, to treat them in a way that bids them success or makes them think that you don't have a problem with what they're teaching, we become party to their false teaching. And so we're just as guilty as they are. But 1 Corinthians 5, what I want to go to, Paul in verse 11 says that we should not even eat with a brother who's living in sin. Now, does that mean that it's wrong to eat in the same room or even at the same table with someone because they're in sin? That's not what Paul's saying. He's saying the same thing as John is saying here. You don't treat that brother that's living in sin in a way that allows him to believe that you don't have a problem with the fact that he's living in sin. You know, I've sat down and drank a cup of coffee with many of erring brother to talk to them about their soul. Brother, can we visit? Come on in here, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. And now I can talk to them about my concern. It's not the fact that you're actually eating, putting something, or drinking, putting something in your mouth. It's not a matter of whether you're in the same room or at the same table. It's a matter of whether or not you are extending fellowship to them as far as they're concerned. Not eating has to do with the relationship. So what we've got to keep in mind is, do our actions and our speech lead them with the idea that we're bidding them Godspeed in their life and the way that they're living? Does my action make me a partaker in their evil deeds? You see, if they leave not knowing where I stand when it comes to now, it's not a matter of saying, I'm dealing with a brother that's living in sin, that, you know, let's spend 30 minutes talking about the ball game yesterday, and oh yeah, before you go, I got a concern. That's kind of lopsided in what they might think is most important. Do my actions make me a partaker in their evil deeds? You know, if yes, if my actions or my words do not make it clear, then yes, I'm wrong. But no, the principle here taught, if not, then the principle here taught is not applicable as far as eating or being in the presence. John's telling the sister, if you help this man, if you help these people that are teaching error, if you're making them comfortable as they're going on their way to cause more people to lose their soul, that would be wrong. You're assisting them in doing wrong. Any other question or comment here? All right, verse 12. Having many things to write to you, I did not wish to do so with paper and ink, but I hope to come to you and speak face to face, that our joy may be full. So John says, well, I can say a whole lot more, but I don't want to write it down. You know, every once in a while, Blaine and I will start texting each other, and suddenly one of us will call the other one, and we'll say, my thumb's wearing out. I didn't want to write that, you know, I just want to talk to you. You know, well, John's saying, I don't want to spend my time putting in the ink, because my goal is to be able to come and look at you face to face and to talk to you in person about this other information that should give her even more joy. And then here in verse 13, the children of your elect sister greet you. Again, if sister means church, then the church of the church, that don't make sense.
He's just talking about nieces and nephews.
So, you know, your nieces and nephews, whom I have seen and know, and it's most likely John's in Ephesus, and these are children that live in Ephesus, grown children, and he's saying, your nieces and nephews say hi. You know, the sister herself is not mentioned, which would indicate that either she is dead or just not living in that area. You know, when he saw some of the children. And because the fact that he refers to the children of your elect sister indicates that she was a Christian and she raised her children to be Christians. All right, that brings us to the end of 2 John. Anybody got a question or a comment? Yes, ma'am.
I'm reading from New King James Version that's published by Apologetics Press, and in the introduction it says, whether this letter was addressed to a specific Christian woman and her family or to a local congregation and its members need not be settled.
And as I stated, there are some that hold that position. The reason why I don't is, to me, it makes no sense to talk about the church and the church in the interpretation of those words. That's my conclusion. But if you decide that he believes he's writing to the church and to the members of the church, we can both still go to heaven.
And everything he said still is applicable.
It still applies, that's right. Anything else? All right, I'm not going to go into 3 John since we've only got about 3 minutes left here. We'll save that one. Next week will be our singing night. We always sing during Thanksgiving week, and that will be our plan. Appreciate your participation and your attention. We are dismissed.
That's what I thought. Well, I'll see you Sunday.